For God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today we're talking about the judgment on Jerusalem, specifically the first ripe figs, and then the parallels between that and modern day judgment on Babylon, or the world that we're living in. So this study is the result of this morning, just Holy Spirit leading me through this passage on Jeremiah. So I'm going to share what I understand about it, and I'll let you draw your own conclusions, but I hope this helps you with your own studies. All right, so the passage here in Jeremiah 24 talks about the good figs and the bad figs, and essentially there are two baskets, one with first ripe figs or good figs, and the other with figs that can't be eaten. We have these two groups. So the first group references the exiles into Babylon, so they're the good figs. Okay, so they followed God and they went into Babylon, and God protected them, and as he says he will, I'll regard them as good, and he says, I'll set my eyes on them for good, I'll bring them back into this land, I'll build them up and not tear them down. Then we have the second group, this rebellious group, that is the second basket, the figs that can't be eaten, referring to Zedekiah, his officials, and the remnant of Jerusalem, or those who remain in the land of Jerusalem, or those who ran off to Egypt. Okay, so you got one group, all the good ones, that, for example, we have Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Ezekiel, Jehoiakim, just some of the examples. And then you have the bad figs, representing Zedekiah, the officials, and anyone who stayed in Jerusalem and basically listened to the king, or listened to, or they tried to flee off to Egypt. So what we understand about remaining in the land, and the remnant of Jerusalem who remained in the land, are those who remain in Babylon or Egypt, the world, right? So God calls us to come out of the world. In Revelation 18:4 we see, "Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, 'Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues.'" And this is in the passage about the judgment on Babylon. So those who stayed and those who stood with Zedekiah, the rebellious, and the officials, those who rebelled, they would die by the sword, right? That was the deal. So, and what we understand is, if you remain in the world and you reject Jesus, the same thing will happen. You'll face God's judgment upon you. So now there are two parts of this that I want to focus on. And God says here that for the good basket, they shall be my people and I will be their God. Okay, and now that is actually a reference to Ezekiel 37, which is a prophecy about Jesus bringing the divided kingdom together. So even though this passage here of Jeremiah is talking about the exile into Babylon and the 70 years after they return and so forth in that period of time, now we're talking about a future prophecy, or we're talking about the fulfillment of Ezekiel 37 that it references, actually being Jesus. So bringing the kingdom back together. Now, what does this tell us? Well, this tells us that if the future prophecy of those who accept Jesus is saved, right? So if Jesus brings his kingdom back and those who believe in him are the good figs, then it also includes those who reject Jesus and are judged, which also includes the bad figs. So we have the two baskets in this future context, not just in the context of this. Now let's understand a little bit about figs. When are figs ripened, and what's the difference? Well, I found this really good resource that I believe is accurate, and it talks about the different ripening. So we can see that we know barley ripens early. It's the first month. So barley is associated with Passover, and the barley harvest is associated with then. The wheat harvest we see in the second month, and that is early So it's really the third month where the main body of the wheat harvest happens, around that Pentecost that we understand. So, and then around that same time, just before early June, we see the early figs, the first ripened figs. So if you come up to this chart here, you can see barley around about that April, May, then the wheat sort of comes in about May, then we see June, the early figs, the first ripe figs start to come in. And then we obviously have the grape harvest. So we're starting to get into this territory now where we've been spending a lot of time on the barley, the wheat. Now we're looking at the figs. Quite interesting, isn't it? How the Holy Spirit teaches us. All right, so let's dive into the first ripe figs. So we see in Isaiah 28, it says, "In the fading flower of its glorious beauty, which is on the head of its rich valley, will be like a first ripe fig before the summer. When someone sees it, he swallows it as soon as it is in hand." Okay, and so what this means is that he's talking about Ephraim here. And I'll save you, I won't read the whole thing, but he's talking about these drunkards of Ephraim, how they're going to be trodden underfoot. So to summarize, it says Ephraim, and you need to understand who Ephraim, and I'll explain here, but Ephraim will be swallowed up like a first ripe fig. They're highly desirable. As soon as they come on the tree, everyone grabs them. And that's, it says here, when someone sees it, he swallows it as soon as that is in his hand, because they were highly desirable. So Ephraim is the name for the northern kingdom. So the divided kingdom, the north and the south. Ephraim became Israel, and was the name associated with that rebellious northern kingdom. And at times it also refers to the entirety of Israel, because it's associating Israel just with their idolatry. So Ephraim will be trodden underfoot, like a first ripe fig is swallowed up. So Israel referring to the rebellious ones. So we can also see if we look up what basket means, basket can also mean a cauldron, a pot for boiling, other than a basket, but it's generally meaning a basket. And, just as a side note, when someone says to sit under one's vine and under one's fig tree, it means to lead a tranquil and happy life. So, what we see in this passage is first ripe figs are highly desirable in Israel. So in Nahum 3:12, it says, "All your fortresses are like fig trees with first ripe figs. If shaken, they fall into the mouth of the eater." So first ripe figs are so desirable, as soon as they are ready, they're eaten. In this context, Ephraim will be eaten up by the mouth of the eater, which means like the devourer or the enemy. Okay, so Ephraim means they're going to be crushed by the enemy, essentially. And we can see here in Hosea, it says, "Like grapes in the wilderness I found Israel, like the first fruit on the fig tree in its first season. I saw your fathers, but they came to Baal pure and consecrated themselves to the things of shame, became detestable like the thing they loved." So when God found Israel, he says, "I found them like," he said they were like grapes in the wilderness. Okay, so a wild grapevine in the wilderness means rebellious, because it's just growing on its own. It's doing its own thing. People did whatever was in their hearts at that time. So we can see here in this passage, it says, God delighted in them like a first ripe fig, but until, right? So when he said they were like the first fruit on the fig tree, so he delighted in them. They would delight to be delighted in until their rebelliousness to God, their idolatry made them detestable. So because they followed after their idols. So we can see that that's when he talks about first ripe figs, he means it's desirable, but then they become not desirable. Amos has a prophecy of summer fruit as well here, and he talks about the summer fruit. Micah really gives us an answer here. So it says, "Woe is me, for I become as when the summer fruit has been gathered, as when the grapes have been gleaned. There is no cluster to eat, no first ripe fig that my soul desires." So what he's saying is Ephraim has become like the summer fruit, a disappointment. There's no first ripe figs anymore to eat, and the grapevine has been stripped bare. So is this disappointment? We can see here that the grapevine has been stripped bare. There's no fruit on the vine at all. In Hosea, it says this: Ephraim is stricken, their root is dried up, they shall bear no fruit. Even though they give birth, I will put their beloved children to death. My God will reject them because they have not listened to him. They shall be wanderers among the nations. Okay, so when we see this, Ephraim will be trodden underfoot like a first ripe fig swallowed up, we see it go back to this, where he's basically, their children are put to death, they're trodden, trampled, and they'll be wanderers among the nations. They just dissolve among the nations because of, God's cast them away. So let's go back to this now and break this down a little bit. So the very good figs, like first ripe figs, the exiles carried away to Babylon, God will protect, restore, and he sees them as his delight. The very bad figs, so bad they can't be eaten, represents King Zedekiah, his officials, and those who remain in Jerusalem or fled to Egypt. God will judge these. So then when we break these two passages down and we see these two fulfillments, one fulfillment for the very good basket is they shall be my people, and Jesus is the fulfillment. So this passage here in Ezekiel, where he promises they shall be my people, I'll be their God. Okay. And it says here in Jeremiah, I will give them a heart to know me, that I am the Lord, and they shall be my people, I will be their God, for they shall return to me with their whole heart. But for the others, he promises that sword, famine, and pestilence will come upon them. And what we see is this parallel in the book of Revelation. And it says, and I looked and behold a pale horse, its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. They were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, with famine, and with pestilence, and by wild beasts of the earth. Okay, so this is what he promises here to Jerusalem, and to those who to Ephraim, and we see that it was judgment on Ephraim and Jerusalem, of course, on both, on the entirety of Israel, but we see this again now, and this judgment falls upon the world, right? It falls upon Babylon, and so we can see here Jeremiah 24:10, and I'll send sword, famine, and pestilence upon them until they be utterly destroyed from the land I gave to their fathers. And we see this other passage in Jeremiah 14. It says, the Lord said to me, do not pray for the welfare of this people. Though they fast, I will not hear their cry, and though they offer burnt offering and grain offering, I will not accept them. I'll consume them by sword, famine, and pestilence. And so let's just have a bit of a look now. So when we have these four horsemen that start to appear in the seals, for example, the reason why we go to this is because it actually says this in the fourth, in the pale horse, right? This is actually what it promises in the pale horse. So when we actually look at these, I've put the colors here, and I've put the, you can see that the pale horse actually means pale green. All right, so you can see here that the white horse, or the white horse rider, represents false Christ, or the Antichrist coming. It's deception, it's false religion, a false religious system, false light, all these things. The next one is a political, it's violence and war, and that's the red horse rider. The third, the black horse rider, is economic, famine, and pestilence. Right, so it's the famine and pestilence. It's the starting point of this, and then we see the wild beasts of the earth represent this persecution and judgment. So they're the raised enemies who are going to make war on just total chaos on the earth, but war on God's people. And then we see famine and pestilences as well. So when we start to get into this a little bit more, and we look at, say, these wild beasts of the earth, we see that as we've been studying, it leads to them being like prideful, evil men, or untamed men. They're wild, chaotic people. So in Psalm 73:22, it says, I was brutish and ignorant, I was like a beast to you. So this brutish and ignorance. In Ecclesiastes 3:18, I said in my heart with regard to the children of man that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are beasts. And these wild beasts or chaotic people, it says in Isaiah, and Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the splendor and pomp of the Chaldeans, will be like Sodom and Gomorrah when God overthrew them. It will never be inhabited and lived in for generations. No Arab will pitch his tent there, no shepherds will make their flocks lie down there, but wild animals will lie down there, and the houses will be full of howling creatures. So these wild animals, or these evil beasts of men, will inhabit Babylon after its fall. Right? They're going to completely and utterly take over Babylon and just ruin it. We see here in 2 Peter 2:12 it says, "But these, like irrational animals, creatures of instinct, born to be caught and destroyed, blaspheming about matters of which they are ignorant, will also be destroyed in their destruction." So it likens these people to these irrational animals, or these creatures of instinct. When we start going up here a little bit into Ezekiel, we see a little bit more about this as well. It says, "When I send against you the deadly arrows of famine, arrows for destruction, which I will send to destroy you, and when I bring more and more famine upon you and break your supply of bread, I'll send famine and wild beasts against you, and they'll rob you of your children." Okay, so these wild beasts, they're raised up enemies. They're not physical animals that are coming to attack you. They're wild beasts. They're these men that they're full of pride. They're wild. They're untamed. They're just chaotic in every way. They're violent, and they're going to basically come onto the earth as part of this. These people, well, they're already here, and they're basically causing total chaos. "Pestilence and blood shall pass through you, and I'll bring the sword upon you. I am the Lord, I have spoken." So this passage here where it talks about this, where he talks about sending the sword and famine upon them, he then starts talking about the wild donkeys. And anyway, who are the wild donkeys? So wild donkeys, it says, "The wild donkeys stand on the bare heights, they pant for air like jackals, their eyes fail because there is no vegetation." And we can see here that there's a reference to Ishmael. And it says in Genesis, "And the angel of the Lord said to her, Behold, you are pregnant, shall bear a son, you shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen." So this prophecy on Ishmael is that his hand will be against everyone, and everyone will be against him. So he's a man of complete conflict, right? And so those who come after him will be of conflict. But we see here that there's also the reference to the wild donkey in the wilderness regarding Israel's idolatry. And it says, "A wild donkey used to the wilderness, in her heat sniffing the wind. Who can restrain her lust? None can seek her, need weary themselves. In the month they'll find her." So wild donkey is someone who lives in the wilderness. It's basically someone who's like an outcast. They choose to dwell in the desert places. So we can see here in Jeremiah 3:2, it says, "Lift up your eyes to the bare heights and see, where have you not been ravished? By the wayside you have sat awaiting lovers like an Arab in the wilderness. You have polluted the land with your vile whoredom." So you can see that the pollution of the land is what it's talking about also in regards to Israel. It sort of shows here that there are these interesting references here to the time of judgment, and then it's referring to these wild donkeys. Wild donkeys referring to this nation of people that will basically, come up against God's people. And that's controversial, of course. So what do we understand about all this? Well, we have these two baskets. There is a past fulfillment and a future fulfillment. The future fulfillment says that this sword, famine, and pestilence, being this seal here, being the fourth seal, will cause for persecution and judgment, enemies to be raised up, these wild beasts of the earth, war, famine, and pestilence, right? So, and who is there in the wilderness in the time of famine, right? It's the wild donkey looking for every green thing he can consume. He consumes up everything he can get. So this wild donkey, that's what he does, right? He goes around and he just keeps consuming everything, just basically causing total chaos. That there is a group of people that do not like Christianity at all, and are coming en masse, and yeah, basically that's where we are. So, all right, I'm gonna leave it there, and thanks. Just wanted to show you some of these references. and you can decide what you think about some of these. Thanks, everyone. God bless, and Maranatha.